Right now, inside your head, there's this whole network of brain regions that is just quietly draining your cognitive battery.
Yeah, constantly running in the background.
Exactly. It's running background processes, analyzing the past, worrying about the future, and basically just consuming an immense amount of neural energy. But what if simply sitting still, directing your attention, could not only force quit those background processes, but actually rewire your neural hardware and upgrade your physical immune system?
I mean, it's a massive paradigm shift in how we view human biology. We're moving entirely away from treating meditation as just, a subjective feeling of relaxation.
Right, like just taking a bubble bath or something.
Right. Instead, we are observing it as a targeted, measurable biological intervention.
And mapping out that biological intervention is our mission for this deep dive because, we have a really heavily vetted stack of sources today for you.
Really do.
We're pulling from systematic reviews of functional neuroimaging. We're looking at EEG data from practitioners with tens of thousands of hours of experience, and even examining this landmark clinical study involving the flu vaccine.
Which is just a fascinating study.
It really is.
Right.
So our goal is to detail the exact structural and chemical changes that happen inside of you when you train your mind. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the literal physical alterations, we kind of have to define the mental exercises driving them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because looking through the literature, meditation is clearly not just one single monolithic activity.
Oh, far from it. I mean, grouping all meditation together would be like using the word sports to describe both marathon running and like playing chess.
Right, totally different skill sets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The neural mechanisms depend entirely on the specific type of mental training you're doing. And the literature generally divides these foundational practices into two broad categories.
Okay.
So you have focused attention, or FA, and open monitoring, which we call OM.
To visualize that distinction for you, I like to think about lighting. So focus attention, FA, kind of feels like operating a spotlight.
I like that.
Yeah, you're shining this very bright, narrow beam on one single target. Whereas open monitoring, OM, is more like turning on a floodlight. You're illuminating the entire space, taking in everything at once without pointing the beam at any specific thing.
That is an incredibly useful framework.
Yeah.
So if we look at the spotlight first, focused attention, this is typically where most practitioners start.
Like focusing on the breath.
Exactly. You direct your attention to a specific object, very commonly the physical sensation of breathing. But the cognitive workout isn't really about just maintaining that focus.
Wait, really?
No, it's about managing what happens when that focus inevitably breaks.
Ah, right.
The training requires monitoring your mind, detecting when your attention's drifted to a distraction, actively disengaging from that distraction, and then intentionally redirecting the spotlight back to the breath.
But wait, if someone says they're focusing effortlessly, how do researchers know they aren't just, sitting there zoning out? Because subjective reporting is notoriously tricky. How do we measure actual sustained concentration?
That is where the research gets highly creative. To bypass that subjective reporting, neuroscientists used an involuntary visual reflex in a study. It's involving something called binocular rivalry.
Binocular rivalry.
Yeah. So in a normal human brain, if you show a person two completely different competing images at the exact same time, say vertical lines to the left eye and horizontal lines to the right eye, the brain cannot merge them.
It just freaks out?
Kind of. It automatically flips back and forth. You see one image, then the other continuously, and you have zero conscious control over the switching.
It's just a hardwired perceptual glitch.
Normally, yes. But when researchers tested Tibetan monks who were highly trained in FA meditation, they discovered these practitioners could actually suppress that automatic visual flipping. Right. They could hold a single, stable, visual image in their mind for significantly longer periods than novice meditators. And that was both during their active meditation and even after the session ended.
So they literally trained their top-down attentional systems to override a fundamental perceptual reflex.
Exactly.
So the spotlight becomes incredibly powerful. But the sources indicate that as practitioners master FA, they eventually transition to the floodlight, right? The open monitoring. They just drop the spotlight altogether.
They do. So in OM, you let go of the specific object of focus. The practice shifts to a non-reactive, moment-to-moment monitoring of just the stream of your experience.
So just sitting and observing.
Yeah, you sit there, you're aware of your thoughts, your emotions, the ambient sounds around you, sensations in your body, but you do not attach to any of them. You don't judge the thought, and you don't, follow down a rabbit hole.
Which sounds very peaceful, but why does that matter for someone just going about their daily life? Like, what is the practical application of not attaching to a thought?
Well, it drastically changes how your brain allocates its processing power. There is a fascinating study on Vipassana practitioners, a tradition that relies really heavily on OM.
Okay.
Researchers had them perform a rapid visual task. So a stream of distractor images was flashed on a screen with two specific target images hidden inside the stream, very close together.
Oh, I'm guessing this triggers the attentional blink,
Yes, exactly.
where your brain gets so excited about spotting the first target that it completely misses the second one right behind it. Like when you get a highly stressful Slack message at work and you get so fixated on it that you completely miss the next 3 lines of important data in your meeting.
That is the exact mechanism. In untrained individuals, the brain hoards cognitive resources on that first target. What's fascinating here is that the Vipassana practitioners, heavily trained in open monitoring, showed a significantly smaller P3B amplitude when they saw the first target.
P3B amplitude.
Yeah, P3B is an event-related brain potential. It basically acts as an index of resource allocation. It measures how much cognitive energy you are investing in a stimulus.
Got it.
The OM meditators didn't overinvest. They noted the first target and immediately let it go. Because they didn't get stuck, their brains were free to process the second target with far greater accuracy.
Wow. They trained their neural circuitry to process information without unnecessary emotional or cognitive friction.
Precisely.
So, if OM trains the mind to stop hoarding resources on a single distracting thought, where is that saved energy actually going physically in the brain?
That's the big question.
Right. How do these mental exercises translate into changes in our internal neural circuitry?
Let's bring back that smartphone analogy I mentioned at the start.
Yeah, I like that one.
For most of us, our brains are running heavy background apps. We have the default mode network, or DMN, which is constantly generating self-referential thoughts, replaying awkward conversations from 5 years ago.
We've all been there. Exactly. Or projecting anxiety into the future. Meditation appears to act like a system override that just force quits those apps.
The functional MRI scans map perfectly onto that analogy. During meditation, we consistently see a marked deactivation in the posterior nodes of the default mode network.
Which area specifically?
Particularly areas like the precuneus and the posterior cingulate cortex. The volume on that endless self-referential loop gets turned down. And at the same time, the corticolimbic circuit, which includes the amygdala, a key driver of fear and emotional reactivity, also quiets down.
But you aren't asleep, you're highly alert. So if the background anxiety apps are closed, what networks are taking over the processing power?
We see a shift in dominance to two other major networks. First, the salience network, or SN, which is anchored by the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula.
And what does the SN do?
The SN is essentially your brain's triage nurse. It monitors your internal state and your external environment and decides what actually warrants your attention right now in the present moment.
Ah.
And alongside the SN, we see heightened activation in the frontoparietal network, the FPN. This is the executive steering wheel of the brain, responsible for sustained attention and complex problem solving.
So the handoff is going from the DMN, which dwells on the past and future, directly over to the SN and SPN, which ground you entirely in the present.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is not simply about turning certain networks off and others on.
Okay, what is it about?
The true neurological benefit comes from the integration between these networks. Long-term meditation increases the functional connectivity among these large-scale circuits. The transition of control between the DMNs, the SN, and the FPN becomes much more fluid.
So they play nicely together.
Exactly. Your emotional centers and your executive control centers begin communicating flawlessly, preventing that feeling of being hijacked by a sudden negative thought.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it's one thing to optimize the network traffic, like updating the software, right? But our sources highlight that this practice actually upgrades the hardware.
Yes, physical changes.
We're talking about literal changes to the physical structure of the brain and profound shifts in its underlying operating frequencies.
Structural MRI data absolutely confirms this. When researchers examine the brains of long-term practitioners, they find increased gray matter density in regions associated with memory, executive function, and emotion regulation.
So the actual tissue gets thicker.
Yes, specifically the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate, the insula, and the hippocampus. The cortical tissue in these areas is physically thicker. Furthermore, interventions like integrated mind-body training, or IBMT, have been shown to improve white matter connectivity.
The white matter being the communication cables that link all those gray matter processing centers together.
Correct. The myelin sheaths around those neural cables become more robust, meaning signals travel faster and more efficiently across the brain.
Okay, so the hardware is upgraded, but I'm stuck on the electrical rhythms, the brain waves. The data shows that general mindfulness practices increase alpha and theta wave power, which, tracks with states of deep relaxation and internal focus. But I'm struggling to understand the findings regarding advanced monks. The sources highlight this phenomenon of gamma synchrony.
Ah, yes, gamma.
Usually, gamma waves are associated with highly intense, hyper-alert brain states. If these practitioners are producing high-amplitude gamma waves, isn't that just a chaotic electrical storm in the brain? I'm picturing an orchestra where every musician is just playing their instrument as loudly as possible to tune up, resulting in total chaos.
Your orchestra analogy works,
Yeah.
but we have to flip the conclusion. It is not the chaotic tuning phase. It is the moment the entire orchestra suddenly drops into a highly complex, synchronized symphony.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In practitioners with 10,000 to 50,000 hours of experience, we observe self-induced high-amplitude gamma synchrony.
Wow.
Typically in the 25 to 42 hertz range, primarily over the frontoparietal regions, the key word is synchrony. This is not random static. Vast, distributed networks of neurons are firing in perfect rhythmic lockstep.
That's incredible.
It is. In neuroscience, this synchronized firing is understood to be the mechanism that binds disparate pieces of information together into a single, cohesive, conscious experience.
And this symphony doesn't stop when they get up from the cushion, does it?
No. And that is a critical finding. This elevated gamma synchrony persists as a baseline trait. The default resting rhythm of their brain operates at a higher, more synchronized frequency than the average person.
So their everyday baseline of consciousness is fundamentally altered.
Fundamentally.
Which brings up a fascinating avenue in the neuromodulation research. Neuroscientists are looking at this precise electrical signature in monks, and they're actively trying to reverse engineer it using technology.
We're seeing a huge surge in research using non-invasive brain stimulation. Tools like transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, and transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS.
So zapping the brain, basically.
Kind of. Researchers are applying highly targeted, very subtle electrical or magnetic fields to these exact frontoparietal regions to artificially induce those gamma and theta wave states.
They're essentially trying to plug a device into someone's head to mimic the biological effects of a silent retreat.
And the preliminary correlations are compelling. For instance, by using magnetic stimulation over the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, researchers have been able to artificially increase gamma power and network coherence.
And what happens to the person when they do that?
When they do this, subjects report significant, measurable increases in feelings of self-compassion and emotional regulation.
That is wild.
By isolating the electrical signature of a meditative state, they're beginning to induce the psychological benefits technologically.
So the brain's physical structure thickens, the communication cables strengthen, and the electrical grid synchronizes. That is a massive, localized upgrade. But this is where the research takes a massive leap.
It does.
Does this localized brain upgrade ripple out and alter the rest of the physical body?
It absolutely does, and the data bridging neuroscience and immunology proves it.
Let's dive into the Davidson study, because I have to admit, when I first read the premise, I was highly skeptical.
Well, a lot of people are.
Yeah. The study took a group of regular healthy employees and put them through an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course at work, MBSR.
Right.
At the end, they claim that simply doing these mental exercises actually made a physical influenza vaccine work better in their bodies. I'm struggling to understand how a purely mental practice can dictate the behavior of circulating antibodies. What is the actual bridge there?
This raises an important question, because the idea of a thought changing a protein sounds impossible until you map the neuroimmunological pathway.
Okay, map it for me.
Let's look at how Davidson's team set up the parameters. They measured the electrical brain activity of these employees before and after the 8-week MBSR program and compared them to a waitlist control group to ensure any changes weren't merely the result of time passing.
Setting up a clear baseline, smart.
Exactly. First, after the 8 weeks, the meditation group showed a significant increase in left-sided anterior brain activation.
And why the left side?
Decades of effective neuroscience demonstrate that greater relative activation in the left anterior region is heavily correlated with dispositional positive effect, meaning a more resilient, positive emotional baseline and a reduction in baseline anxiety.
Okay, so their brains physically shifted into a more positive, less anxious operating state. But how does that left-sided activation actually talk to the immune system?
Through the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system, the brain is the master regulator of your stress hormones.
Right.
When your brain operates in a chronic state of anxiety, often driven by that default mode network we discussed earlier, it constantly triggers the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response.
Which releases cortisol.
Cortisol and adrenaline, which biologically suppress immune function. By shifting the brain's baseline to the left anterior region, the meditators effectively increased their vagal tone and reduced their sympathetic arousal. They basically took the brakes off their immune system.
Wow. So by reducing the chronic, low-grade neural alarm, the body's natural defense systems were finally allowed to operate at full capacity.
Precisely. And they proved it with the influenza vaccine. They administered the standard flu vaccine to both the meditators and the control group at the end of the 8-week program.
Okay.
Over the following weeks, they drew blood and measured the antibody titers. Those are the actual physical proteins the immune system manufactures to neutralize the virus.
And the results in the blood matched the results in the brain.
They did. The meditators produced significantly higher antibody titers in response to the vaccine compared to the non-meditators. Their immune systems mounted a much more robust physical defense.
That's amazing.
But the most profound finding was the direct correlation between the two data sets. The magnitude of the brain shift, exactly how much a person's brain activity shifted toward that positive left-sided anterior activation, directly predicted the magnitude of their immune response.
Wait, really? The people whose brains changed the most were the exact same people whose immune systems produced the highest number of antibodies.
Yes. The data drew a straight line from the neural network to the humoral immune response.
So what does this all mean? It means the mind, the brain, and the immune system are not separate silos. They are not isolated biological functions. They are a single, highly integrated, highly trainable ecosystem.
Beautifully put.
A shift in cognitive processing wasn't just a subjective improvement in mood. It served as a cascading biological instruction that ended with the immune system building stronger physical armor against a virus.
It forces us to entirely redefine the phrase mind-body connection. It is no longer a wellness metaphor. It is a quantifiable neuroimmunological reality.
Absolutely incredible. Let's briefly recap the scope of this deep dive. We started by mapping the specific mental workouts of meditation, the spotlight of focused attention, and the floodlight of open monitoring.
Right.
We explored how those precise exercises physically change the brain's resource allocation, force-quitting the draining background loops of the default mode network, and handing the steering wheel over to the salience and frontoparietal network.
The network integration.
Exactly. From there, we looked at the literal physical upgrades. Thicker gray matter, structurally reinforced white matter cables, and the profound synchronized symphony of high-amplitude gamma waves.
Yep.
And finally, we saw the exact biological pathway where that optimized, less anxious brain removes the suppressive brakes on the physical body, allowing the immune system to generate a stronger antibody response to a vaccine.
It really is a remarkable testament to neuroplasticity, showing us just how deeply our conscious attention can alter our physical biology.
It really is. But I want to leave you with a final forward-looking thought, drawing on that neuromodulation research we touched on earlier. Neuroscientists are successfully using magnetic and electrical stimulation to artificially induce the exact gamma waves and network changes we see in monks who have dedicated 40,000 hours of their lives to this practice. It begs a fascinating question about the future. If technology advances to the point where it can grant us the biological, neurological, and immunological benefits of a lifetime of meditation at the push of a button, will traditional meditation become obsolete? Or is the effort itself, the daily discipline, the frustration of the wandering mind, the gradual subjective journey of the practice, the very thing that gives it meaning? Is the mental workout the point? Or is it just about the physical muscle it builds, something for you to ponder as you go about your day?